Hi, Patrice here. I'm just gonna accept that that's my thing to say Patrice here. I don't know, because I do it every single time. I notice. So I am excuse me, still having voice issues here, but whatever. I'm on my way home from dropping my daughter to work, and I wanted to do this video. I just realized that I had a video that I thought I made public but hadn't, and so that was a pleasant surprise, because when I really just wasn't feeling well enough to even do any videos, I still had some in queue, so it was perfect. And to discover a whole nother video that I had done prior to that, it was okay, cool, good. So I'm quite pleased with myself. But okay guys, let me go. So I wanted to tell you about some of the stuff that I'm discovering. All this stuff, it's just wow. It's like I don't know, a bucket or a cage of butterflies, and it's the trauma cage, and all the butterflies represent the different traumas that you've experienced. And when you decide to open that thing, all these jokers start flying out, and in the form of memories and nightmares and just all this stuff. It's oh my gosh. And it's at times it's exhausting. I have actually been getting good sleep lately, but my goodness, I'm still tired. I'm tired because just all the stuff that goes along with this whole recovery process. And but it's good. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I would not trade it for the denial that I was in before. And I'm happy, So I wanted to tell you. So obviously, if you haven't figured it out yet, I go to therapy. I have a really good therapist now. The one I had before wasn't the best fit, I realized after a while, and it was really hard for me to end that relationship, because I genuinely like people, and I have I don't know, this sense of loyalty that's just ridiculous. Even if you're not so good for me, I'll remain loyal, and it's just a problem. So but I was able to go ahead and break it off a few months after I realized I needed to, but I did it. And I have a new therapist now who I adore. So she and I were talking, and I don't even know how it came up, but I brought up, I said to her, I said, one, I know we were talking about touch. I have an issue with certain types of touch that I thought had to do with having been sexually abused. But she explained to me that there's, different types of touch that, it's just different. It's not all just because it's touch, it's not just sexual, And so she mentioned touch, how as a baby, if you didn't get the amount of touch that you needed, you could be ultra sensitive to touch, to where somebody, in conversing with you, that's what happens to me. Somebody could be talking to me, and people get a little handsy, and not overly so or whatever, but they'll just touch your arm or something, and I'll rear back sometimes. It doesn't happen every time, and but when it does, I feel embarrassed and very uncomfortable, and I'm oh my God, I hope they didn't notice and think, I don't want them to touch me. It's just a reaction that my body has at times. And so that, I thought that was from being sexually abused, but she was no. She said sometimes these things happen because you weren't touched properly, when you were a baby, and and on. And I was well, yeah, I wasn't. I mean, my mother, I would try to sit on her lap, or or just, like hug up on her or whatever. And she would joke, but she would be like, girl, get off me, get your big butt off me. And so it wasn't allowed, and then but she would tell me stories. My mother had a very strange way of telling horrible stories as if they were fun memories or nice or even, funny, because she would laugh. And so maybe two such memories. One was where I understand that I didn't have the right attachment right from birth. Like she had a C-section, and she says that she was pushing, and then it was like, let's do a C-section. And so they did the C-section, and after the cesarean, she was knocked out for 3 days, she said. And I'm saying she said because I really don't know what's true and what's not with my mom anymore. So she said she was knocked out for 3 days. So that's 3 days that the little baby was separated from the mother. That, like you have to think about, like, as a doula and student midwife and all that, the birth worker in me cringes at all this stuff, because I'm like, oh my God, like this little baby grew in the womb, hearing the mother's heartbeat, felt held close. Now they come out of the womb and she's gone, and it's like, where am I? What is going on? Like, it's awful. So for 3 days, she says she didn't even see me. And then when she did see me, she said when the nurse brought me to her, she looked at me and looked at the nurse, because she said the nurse was like Asian. And the nurse handed her baby, and she's looking at the baby and she's like, this is not my baby. And so she commences to getting into it with the nurse about how she brought her the wrong baby. And the reason is because my mother is very dark and I'm in the middle of her and my father. My father is light skinned, I'm brown. And so she didn't take into account that I could take my complexion more from my father, side. But eventually she looked at me, she said, and realized that I looked like, at that time, like my grandmother, and on my father's side. And so that baby heard that baby, like, like the baby was separated for 3 days from her, and then the baby, upon first seeing her mother, is rejected again. And then she told another story, like throughout my life she would tell this story, another story where she says when she went, she brought the baby home, and I'm hearing myself keep saying the baby instead of me most of the time, but there's something with that too, like this detachment. But anyway, maybe that's like a defense thing too. So that's another thing I need to talk about a little bit that I'm discovering with myself. So she took the baby home, and the baby was crying. The baby was fed, the baby was changed, and she didn't understand why the baby was crying. So she took the baby and put the baby in the middle of the bed, and she left the house. And I find that interesting because, just a few short years later, she would begin to put the baby out of the house, But that time, at that time, she, would just put the baby in the middle of the bed so that the baby can't just roll off the bed. And she left. And she said she would just sit outside on the stoop until she didn't hear the baby crying anymore. And then and so the baby pretty much just cried herself to sleep. And yeah, we don't even have to, like, what do you say to that? I didn't even know how to respond to these stories growing up. It was just like, I don't know, you just, it's just weird. So listening to that, and or telling my therapist about that, and then I told her how I had this thing growing up where and I said, I don't know if this is right or wrong, And I said, so you tell me, but growing up, if I got sick and vomited, I would have to clean it up. And she's like, what do you mean? Anyway, so because I'm actually thinking about somebody else that I told this story to, and so I'm like, did she say that or was it them? But anyway, so I was like, yeah, I had to clean up my vomit if I vomited when I was sick. And I remember a time when my cousin Boogie, he was living with us then, and I had gotten sick and I vomited and I didn't make it to the trash or the toilet or anything. And so I went to go and start cleaning it up, and he was like, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm about to clean it up. And he was like, I got it, you sick, and I was just like, you sure? Like, okay, and he started cleaning it up, and his crazy behind, he started playing in it and all. But that's that's Boogie for you. But that kind of stuff is like foreign to me. And she was like, that is not normal. No, that's not normal for you to have to clean up your own vomit as a child. No, that's not normal. And I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, I know I was like 15 at like when Boogie cleaned it up. I was about 15 years old, and I'm like, and then I started thinking, wait, when my children are sick, I do clean it up. I don't expect them to clean up their, and so, and then that led me to thinking about the time that I was in the middle. I woke up. I was pregnant. I woke up and in the middle of like having a miscarriage. And when I awoke, the entire bed, like seriously, the entire bed was like it was amniotic fluid and blood. And I was like mortified because I was like, oh my God, my husband is laying there asleep. And my husband has a thing, he's like real skeeved with period blood. And so I was like, he don't care about like birth related stuff. He's used to that because I had the babies at home and all that. But period blood he can't deal with. But in my head, I'm thinking like, oh, I gotta clean this up, and I'm gonna have to wake him up in order to clean it up, and he's gonna have to see it, and oh my gosh, like this is crazy. Meanwhile, I'm having contractions and lost all my fluids and everything. I wake him up and I said, listen, I gotta go to the bathroom. I made a big mess here. I'm gonna clean it up. I'll be back. And I went to the bathroom and the contractions were going. I bathed and everything. When I came back into my room, my bed was completely made over. He had put down the Chuck's pads in case I had another accident. And he even put a Chuck's pad on the floor beside the bed. And I went back into the room and he was like, just lay down. And I'm looking like, you cleaned all this up, And he's like, just lay down. And I was like, well, no, I don't want to mess the bed up again. He was like, Treese, lay down. And so I laid down and he went to the bathroom. And then by the time he came back, I had like everything came out. And it was on the Chuck's pad on the floor by the bed. And when he came back, I was scrambling. I'm naked, butt in the air, trying to scramble and clean everything up so that he don't have to see it or deal with it. And again, when he came back and he saw me, he was like, what are you doing? And I was like, things came out. And he was like, let me see, and I was like, well, no, I was trying to clean it up so that you didn't have to deal with this. And he was like, Treese, and my therapist she said, so you were having a miscarriage and you're concerned about cleaning up so that he don't see like the mess? And I was like, yeah. And she was like, do you understand where this came from? And I'm like, my mom, I guess. And she was like, like you think kind of thing. And my mother is like, you don't have any messes in her house. No way. No, like, and she explained to me and helped me to see like that I didn't, like my self-worth is so like low that I'm even in the midst of going through that, my concern is cleaning up and making sure that everything is good for my husband, who didn't require that at all. You know, there's been many times where he has cleaned up after me with when I was like ill or something. So that's yeah, geez, that's one thing I wanted to talk about. But yeah, and seeing that, because I didn't know that I didn't, like, I thought I had a good sense of self-worth, but apparently that's not the case. So I'm gonna work on that, and I'm gonna end this video now because I really like to keep them relatively short. But I'm thinking like of other things that I want to discuss now, actually, so that's why I'm kind of like keep pausing a little bit. But if you want to see more, you know, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and thanks as always for watching. Bye.